Hello, everyone. Welcome to Take Human Action PA, episode 53. I'm Calvin, I'm your host, and we were supposed to talk about Hawaiian independence today, and I will still touch on it. I won't break down the subject in full today, as we had a last minute rescheduling of our guest, unfortunately. So that will be rescheduled for sometime in the near future. I do want to touch on it a little bit, though, since it is, in fact, the eve of the 125th anniversary of the annexation of Hawaii tomorrow. So last week, if you'll remember, I did mention that excuse me, it was in the Today in History posts that I've been talking about in the context of the Libertarian Party Pennsylvania tweets that I have been doing recently. We talked about how Grover Cleveland, who was one of the few classically liberal or libertarian leaning presidents that we have ever had, he actually played a big role in doing what he could to stop the annexation. Oh, hang on. It looks like we do have our guest here after all. But yeah, I'll just finish my thought real quick. So we do have Grover Cleveland, who he played a big role in that, but I won't break it down right now since we have him here. I'll just go straight to introducing our guest. So our guest is a community organizer and farmer from the island of Oahu. He at his community center, I'm probably going to butcher the pronunciation. I'm sure he'll correct me in a moment. Hui Aloha Āina Momona. He teaches farming, Hawaiian cultural heritage, and history. And we'll also be talking about the history of Hawaii itself, how Hawaii became part of the United States, and what the future looks like for the island chain. So let's bring on Dan. Well, good to see you. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. I apologize. A city building inspector showed up at my house and
No.
oh yeah, I actually had a violation from 2017 because I raised no smell pigs, and my although I'm on an Ag 2 lot, I'm 0.009 of an acre to qualify to raise animals. So my neighbor had complained. I got a violation. Since 2017, this is the first time that they've come, and at this point, I'm not too stressed about getting any citations, but I was required to spend a few moments with this gentleman. So again, I apologize for tuning in late, and I am super grateful to spend some time here with you today.
Right on. And somebody else is already saying hi as well. Hawaiian Punch. Is that a friend of yours?
Nope, but I'm excited to, connect with, the diaspora, the connection of Hawaiians that don't live in Hawaii today is more than 50%.
Yeah, I remember hearing when I was over there, somebody was saying, I'm trying to remember what the exact quote was, but they said like Las Vegas is the sixth island or something.
They call it the ninth island. Yes.
Yeah, right. Okay, right on. So why don't we get started with you? Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got involved with the community center?
Essentially, I'm a super naughty kid, um, total at risk. Grew up in a really diverse community on the leeward side of Oahu. The community that I grew up in, Waianae, is situated in one of the most beautiful places in the world. Unfortunately, the theft of all of its rivers has caused catastrophic negative impacts to the land, to the ocean, and really to the people. Native Hawaiians today in Hawaii are in the worst statistics of health, and the community that I grew up in um, basically bore the brunt of those statistics. So if you could just imagine growing up in like the most incredible place, but people are unhealthy and unhappy, and how that might have an impact on your outlook in life. I'm very blessed throughout my life because of my at-riskness. I was always put into those quote unquote experimental education groups where they were using culture or outdoor activities. And so I was am blessed to have many mentors. Many people in the community have gone out of their way to help to raise and nurture me. Um, I can only tell you that the greatest lessons in life I've learned by sometimes not listening. Um, Ultimately, uh, growing up, I learned and had a deep relationship with my na'au, my my intuition. Uh, I've been a farmer since I was 2 years old. I'm the son of a commercial fisherman, so my dad was a fisherman. My stepmother was a farmer. Uh, I'm super blessed to be able to exist in a way that I think many people think is not possible, or a way of the past, where the land and the community play a huge role in our current existence. I grew up farming taro, and at the age of 12, I started to make poi traditionally. My dad was influenced by some elders from one of our outer islands, Miloli'i, the last Hawaiian fishing village. The elders moved into our community to actually teach us their fishing ways, and with that, they brought their taro pounding and poi making practices, of which my dad gravitated to. I grew up in a household where, these boards behind me, those are poi boards, not quite finished, but I grew up in a household with boards and stones, and I had access to taro. It was this relationship that I built with this food that has led me, 30 something years later. I'm 45 now, and I'm a full-time farmer and community advocate. In 2009, I was cited by the Department of Health for making poi traditionally. In 2011, we were able to legalize traditional poi making. I've spent over the last decade going from island to island, really just trying to inspire families to begin their pathway to sustainability, starting with the making of poi boards and stones, and the beginning of making food for themselves. I'm kind
Right.
of a
Yeah.
broken record.
That was
I've done
fine.
the same things.
You raised a lot of good points. I want to break a little bit of that down. So
Perfect.
for mainlanders who have never been to Hawaii, could you explain what taro and poi is?
Of course. Um, so taro is our staple starch crop that is connected to 2,000 varieties found in over 85 countries in the world. Essentially, those ancient people that chose to travel by ocean sort of learned to take pseudocorms, to take plants that were not seeds, or to take seeds that could get wet in the ocean. So taro is a plant that is the starter is the stalk. So the same plant can be replanted time and time again. So it is said that the taro that we plant today is literally some of the same taro that our ancestors planted. California and actually Florida. Florida is the #1 taro producing state. So it grows in more subtropical climates. It generally takes about 6 to 12 months for the root corm to mature into a very nutritious starch. It's a complex carbohydrate. Uh, the corm of it is a carbohydrate. The the stalk and the leaf is a protein, kind of like a spinach. It has a very strong calcium oxalate crystal that makes it almost impossible to eat raw. Although there is one Japanese variety that can be eaten raw. Generally, you have to steam it or boil it to release this crystal, and then you get, you can make it into a flour. That's the type of starch that it is. In fact, in the uh, later years of the Hawaiian kingdom as a nation state, taro flour was one of its biggest exports, second to sugarcane.
Right. Yeah. So when I had it, it seemed like, I mean, the taste of it is very different, but it did seem comparable in some ways to a potato, which I'm sure most people would be familiar with.
I would say, yeah, it would be considered similar to a potato, but when you make it into poi, it becomes more of like a wine, where it's a carrier of indigenous microbes from the land, and the fermentation process, it actually goes from a starch into a protein in the fermentation process.
Yeah,
So
that is.
Hawaii, I'm sorry, please.
Oh, I was just saying that is unique. That's a unique aspect of it.
Hawaii is the only place in the world out of these 2,000 varieties that make poi. Um, and it was considered to be somewhat of a top secret formula. This is an ancient food preservation practice that allowed the Hawaiians to travel to the most isolated place on planet Earth. It's because they had the secret food. And at the time of Captain Cook, there was no cavities, perfect structure, beautiful, healthy bodies. And this was majorly in part to the consumption of anywhere from 3 to 5 billion pounds of taro per year. It was said that a poor Hawaiian ate 5 pounds, that a wealthy Hawaiian ate 15. So it's a type of starch that was considered like the main dish, and then the fish or whatever the protein that was associated was considered the inai. It was a side dish. And so you can imagine when you have because the poi is a protein when it ferments, it's very much like a keto diet where you're consuming all proteins, but majority of them are plant or seaweed based.
Mm-hmm. Right. So when you have poi, is that so you have the fermented taro and you wrap it in the tea leaves? Is that right?
Basically, we harvest the taro, we
Mm-hmm.
steam it at its peak freshness.
Mm-hmm.
We clean off the skin, we remove all of the sweeter parts of the starch until we just have the essence of it. Then we pound that. We release the starch molecules like an egg, and when you crack it, in it is it it looks glutinous, but it's gluten free.
Okay.
Uh, this molecule, the in it are these beneficial sugars that this microbe consumes, and then its byproduct, the microbe's byproduct, is a protein. So
Mm-hmm.
uh, it's a superfood that has some research on it, but because nobody ever defined poi from a traditional perspective, most of the research out there is with a poi-like product, not actually with poi. So
Right.
if you came here and you ate poi, you actually ate a poi-like product. Unless you saw the guy hand pounding it and hand mixing it, as one of my favorite uh, chef friends, Leanne Wong, says, if you change a recipe by one step or one ingredient, it is no longer the recipe.
Hmm.
And that's the same thing with poi. Once they changed the recipe, it actually had different shelf life. It had different health impacts. Like the commercial poi, diabetics can't eat it, but the traditional made poi, actually, uh, they they need less of their diabetic medicine once they start eating traditional poi.
Right. So and the I think the important part to highlight for what we're going to talk about later on is it had been made this way for at least hundreds of years, right? It was something that would be passed down from generation to generation.
And I'm sorry, there's a little bit of background noise where I had found a seat, so I'm moving. But essentially, the the genealogy of Hawaiians puts the taro as their ancestral older brother. So this poi making relationship actually predates Hawaiians. Yeah, it
Hmm.
is said after the taro was born, then the next sibling was the first Hawaiian. And so we're probably thinking more like 2,000 years
Wow.
of existence. And I'm gonna just take this opportunity to go sit down in my taro patch, and we can show you guys what this plant looks like. So
Sure, sure, by all means.
here's the leaf of the plant.
Yeah, so it's for anyone who's listening to audio only, it's the leaf is larger than either of our heads.
The leaf can range in size depending on what the nutrients are, but it's a heart-shaped leaf. Um, you know, taro is really popular as a water feature plant because it grows well in sort of swampy conditions, and it has varieties of colors. There's like a black and a red leaf. Down at the bottom here, these are immature, so there isn't a corm, but down here is where we would find the corm, and the entire plant is edible. So all of this stalk, all the way up to the leaves, can be cooked down into like a stew, like a spinach. We do a one with octopus, one with beef, one with pork. Very simple. Lau lau is actually the leaves wrapped up around some type of starch
Right.
or meat.
That's what I was thinking of earlier. Okay, a little out.
Yes, you're thinking of lau lau, and you would be correct.
Okay. All right. Now we're on something. So, uh, the poi had been around for 2,000 years, and then it was banned. So what happened?
So the traditional making of poi um, came across a few sort of major turning points. So first of all, the Chinese came in the 1820s, and the Chinese onset uh, with them came smallpox, uh, measles, and leprosy. And so these diseases essentially wiped out over 50% of the Hawaiian population in about a 20-year span. This created an opportunity. You know, the thing you love about the Chinese is they see a business opportunity, they seize it. So the very first commercial toy was actually by Chinese immigrants.
Hmm.
And so anytime that you have another, I just want you to imagine if all of a sudden, uh, Venezuelans or something took over the hamburger business, right? The hamburgers would taste different. They'd be made differently than how we make them in America, perceivably. Even though they would have copied they would have just changed their recipe. And so the first initial changes in the recipe was how the taro was cleaned. And by the 1850s in the Hawaiian language newspaper, um, the community had to start using cheesecloth to strain the poi because it was dirty, because it wasn't cleaned well. There were even writings in the paper where they say they could taste the sweat of the Chinaman in the poi. Those are literal words, and I hope I'm not offending anyone out there. Um, what had occurred was that the cultural cleanliness asserted when making food for your family was radically changed when it was commercialized, and the demand exceeded the availability. People had to start to eat what was available, right? These sugar plantations diverted water, took land. No longer were the native people able to grow their taro, and it was actually easier for a Chinese immigrant to go and rent land and water from the plantation to grow taro than it was for the native Hawaiian. In addition, 50% of the farmers died. right? And so it, over the years, basically the recipe had begun to get watered down. So in 1911, there was a cholera outbreak, and it was traced back to the poi. And specifically, it was Japanese farmers in Manoa that were using water from the duck pond to mix the poi. No wonder there was a cholera outbreak. Um, and so, with this happening, also timed within a decade of the poi machine being invented, the very first poi machines start coming out about 1899 to 1901. And by 1911, there's a good mix of poi machine to hand pounders. And you can imagine, um, hand pounding is something that uh, can be very physical work. And depending on how you're prepared to do it, it's very easy to make it in sort of an unsanitary way. And so in 1911, the Department of Health, after closing down all of the poi mills, um, only reopened and gave a permit if you had a cement floor, pipe water, and a machine. So in Oahu, traditional hand pounding was banned in 1911, and in 1959, with statehood, the Department of Health, instead of it being like a county office where every county had their own regulations, it became a state organization, and the state rules of Oahu applied to all of the islands. And so traditional poi making in 1959 with statehood was basically enforced. In 2009, 2009, I went to a workshop, and at this workshop, uh, I became self-aware that I was actually a cultural practitioner. Prior to that, I I was just living my life, you know, um, and couldn't clearly see the cultural ways that we were doing as being something that was unique or something that other families didn't have. I just assumed every family was like ours, that caught fish and had relationships with farmers and made their own poi. And I decided in 2009 that how I was going to challenge myself in my practice was to pound 10,000 pounds of taro. And by September of 2009, at 50 pounds a day, I had achieved that. And so we went to start a business. And 2 weeks later, I was at the farmer's market making poi traditionally. And someone took a picture. And the following week, my picture was front page of the newspaper. And the following week, the Department of Health was looking for me. And essentially, their stance was that the wood and the stone being porous surfaces sort of went against code. FDA code requires all food prep surfaces to be non-porous. And the fact that I was pounding it in a traditional loincloth um, and touching the food with my bare hands just completely freaked them out. And so at the time, there was about 25 hand pounders on the island of Oahu. And we, I don't want to say we all laughed about it, but it was kind of like one of those like, hey, good try, Daniel. Sorry it didn't work out. And not much thought was put towards it. There was a restaurant called Town Restaurant. They actually closed down for good sometime during COVID, but they were really one of the premier farm to table restaurants. And they came to me and said, Daniel, we want to put pa'iai on our menu. And so throughout 2010, there was I actually participated in like a black market of traditional handmade poi. And in 2010, we ended up at the end of the year doing a big taro festival. And in the newspaper write up, it mentioned that you could go to this restaurant to try handmade poi. And a week later, the Department of Health raided that restaurant. As irony would have it, that restaurant was right across from the state capitol in the business district. And all the politicians and the businessmen obviously hadn't died from eating it. Um, one, because it's not a potentially hazardous food. Two is that we actually take making poi extremely serious and um, do it actually at a higher standard than the Department of Health requires. Um, but because sort of a high end group lost a favorite food, there was sort of a discussion. That discussion ended up happening at one of the Hawaiian institutions, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, and they decided to call together a meeting of the main traditional poi makers. And at the end of the meeting, one of the elders asked them what they were going to do. And the Department of Hawaiian, not Hawaiian Homes, OHA, Office of Hawaiian Affairs, said, "Oh, we're not here to take a stance or do anything. We just came to get information." And so this elder, Earl Kava, turned to the group and said, "Okay, guys, what are we going to do?" And we started a group, Legalized Pa'iai Ohana. We went and lobbied, and we, in one legislative year, actually changed the law. And today, because of that law, we are the only food preparers in Hawaii that can cook food with bare hands. And the way that the law was created, as long as we attend a free Department of Health food safety course, we we're not required to make the poi in a certified kitchen for sale.
Wow, that's a big change in a short time. Yeah, I mean, how long did you think it might take going in? Like, did you think you'd come out of it in the end having the success that you did?
You know, I think it's kind of cocky to say that God was on our side, but we represented the type of health that our community has been desperately seeking. And although the legislature um, didn't fully understand the repercussions and how fast that this was going to grow, um, it was a hard sell to go against these traditionalists wanting to make food in their ancestral manner when every other culture had an exemption. You know, you go to Chinatown, they're hanging a duck, they're cutting it on a wooden slab. How is that possible? Well, their cultural practices were grandfathered in. And when you break down the science, until the duck is cut, the roasting of it actually encapsulates it and creates a bacteria free environment, essentially. So only when it's cut does it need to be stored in sort of this Department of Health manner. And so, you know, I was told when we started that it was going to take 10 years, and that wasn't acceptable. So we kind of went in heavy handed. We went in really strong,
When you
and
went
we
all in.
really organized our community. And you know, the thing that we did, we actually went to the state capitol on opening day, and we did a super huge illegal poi making uh, exhibition, and then we gave this illegal poi to every single office in the state capitol. And we
So you,
sort of started it with, "We're here to feed you. This is what this bill is about." And since 2011, we've organized opening day. We've done poi making at the state capitol on opening day since then. So that's going on 14 years.
yeah, I was about to ask you how you did it, but that, yeah, that's definitely a way to make it so that they can't forget about you.
It also was some of it was, there hadn't been any prominent Native Hawaiian legislation in some years. And so we
Mhm.
were the first sort of big cultural legislation that the state had to deal with. And it has really provided a pathway to recognize that there is an indigenous community perpetuating indigenous economies here in Hawaii that are not necessarily segregated by race, but it's by cultural practice and lifestyle. And that as much as, you know, we've been invaded by this Western lifestyle, the cultural ways of Hawaii still remain relevant. Like
Yeah, that
2,000 years later, it's still the best way to make your food, the safest way.
yeah. I mean, they were doing it that way for thousands of years for a reason. So why don't you talk about what you're doing now with teaching others?
Since 2011 and the legalization of it, it's like, okay, the doors are open. What do you do now? And it has been amazing to see the growth. Um, there there's been approximately 25,000 poi boards that have been made in the last decade. So these are, tens of thousands of people that are bringing this practice into their lifestyle, into their home, teaching their children. And so that has jump started the demand for taro, for seed stock, for access to how to make your equipment. We uh we basically been doing R&D since 2011. We put out a little over 2,000 poi boards. Today, our main focus, our goal is to put out 5,000 boards a year. So we've acquired a mill. We work with uh, a variety of arborists to get reclaimed logs. We do a traditional curing method of which we soak the wood in a fish pond for 12 weeks. And now we're offering workshops and classes. We just had a workshop this past weekend. We made 28 poi boards and 15 traditional surfboards in 4 days. So the work that we do, it actually encompasses more than that. We do no smell pig pens and chicken coops, and we teach people how to build soils. And the idea is that we all begin to participate in a more sustainable lifestyle. And it's really not even about feeding your neighbor. It's just taking yourself out of the import food system. That's the first goal. And we've been doing it as an organization. Our website is ainamomona.org, AINAMOMONA.org. And we're really a small organization. Up until last year, our biggest fundraiser was about 25,000. We raise money to host community events. We do two big events a year. One is the opening day at the Capitol. The other is La Hoi Hoi Ea, and that is Hawaiian Sovereignty Restoration Day. And this is Hawaii's very first holiday, started in 1843. And it was around the first overthrow by the British of the Hawaiian Kingdom government. And it celebrates the day that Sir Admiral Thomas um, took down the Union Jack and re-raised the Hawaiian Kingdom flag. And it is sort of the established pathway of the expectations of international and mutual respect. Um, After that had occurred in 1843, the king at the time, Kauikeaoli Kamehameha III, went on a mission. And that mission undoubtedly gained Hawaii to be the very first non European country to have treaties with every single European country. And that was the framework of the Hawaiian independence that was clearly acknowledged and recognized internationally from 1843. In fact, the Anglo-Franco Treaty, the very first treaty that was established, France, Great Britain, Germany, and the United States. The U.S. was the very first to sign that, and they signed a perpetual treaty of friendship. So we uh, we do those two events a year, and last year, actually in 2021, in the ending of COVID, we got an eviction letter. Um, the owners of the farm, the children, decided that they were going to try to sell it to a developer, and we went on a huge community campaign that ended with us crowdsourcing just over 750,000, and that combined with a traditional $800,000 loan, we're actually able to purchase the 3-acre farm that we're on.
Yeah, so that is wonderful to hear. And it's I could tell from the short time period that I was there not long ago that, I mean, costs for just about everything, like cost of living, but particularly food, has gone way up recently. Having everything to do with like recent inflation and, in the post-COVID era, and for you guys in Hawaii, it's generally a lot. It costs you a lot more than it does pretty much anywhere here on the mainland. So the more you can provide for yourself, it's definitely going to be beneficial for you.
The sad truth is that we don't actually pay the real cost of food here. Our food is subsidized, right? And so could you imagine if it wasn't subsidized, what we would be paying? And sort of the challenge that we live in, the food crisis that we have, is that subsidized food has allowed for the state of Hawaii to operate in a fashion where it undervalues ag land to the demise of the community for luxury and mass home developments. And so all of our best ag lands are now huge housing developments. And the only way they were able to do that is because of the amount of food that we import, right? If we had to sustain ourselves, the amount of water and land necessary is at odds with the military and luxury home complex. And so, we're really at a crossroads in Hawaii, because I don't know very many farmers that can afford $1 million acres, and it's almost at that price. Our 3 acres, we got it for 1.55 million, which is 500,000 an acre. I don't know anywhere in the United States that you'd be able to make it as a farmer on 500,000 an acre.
No.
Like, that's just unheard of.
Yeah, and this isn't like, well, are you in the city limits of Honolulu or no? You're outside, right?
Well, the irony is that the entire island is in the county of Honolulu. You can drive around the whole island in an hour and a half max. So we're 20 minutes outside of Honolulu. Beautiful tomato. Look, this is what my son just harvested right there.
Wow.
He's my main farmer. He's not feeling the best today, but
Yeah, I'm still gonna have to wait a couple minutes before my tomatoes come up.
yeah, right. We can grow food all year long.
Mm-hmm.
And so the fact that we're not growing food is a mental crisis. Yeah. It's the fact that people are comfortable and feel okay with consuming a 100% imported diet when, you think of it. What do people come to Hawaii for? Sunshine and rainbows. Don't you want to eat the food grown with sunshine and rainbows?
Well,
Like,
yeah, I did. Not for every meal, but I did as much as I could, and it's not to be missed.
we were considered cute, our organization and our work, until COVID hit. And then we were one of the few organizations that had experience in healing sick land, had access to root stock. During COVID, we actually gave out over 50,000 taro root stock. So this part right here gets cut and replanted, this whole stem. And we gave out over 50,000 of them during COVID. We helped over 25 families establish no-smell pig pens. We helped plant and get out over 8,000 breadfruit trees in the community. So it's one of those things that timing is everything.
Oh yeah.
And the problems we have in Hawaii are really global solutions when we solve them here, because every community is dealing with, depleted ag lands from commercial, corporate, chemical agriculture. Yeah, that everyone's trying to figure out how to develop more sustainable ways to even just grow your lawn. Yeah, it's like the use of chemicals is so rampant, and we have become a nation dependent on the importation of chemicals, so much that this Ukraine war caused in some cases agrochemicals to go up 400%.
Yeah, yeah. We've definitely talked about Ukraine on this show. No shortage of that. But as far as what you were saying earlier, like we here as libertarians and members of the Mises Caucus, I don't know how many other libertarians you've talked to, but we're all about sustainability. And I was even seeing some comments just now about people who are talking about that as well. Like I moved out of the city a couple of years ago, and I've been trying to get started on growing some more food of my own ever since. And I think I'm finally going to have some more success with it this year. So that's definitely a high priority among libertarians right now. We're talking about it all the time.
Well, yeah, our work that we do here speaks directly to how to be sustainable,
Mm-hmm.
and the concepts that we have can actually be applied anywhere. We started a fertilizer company during COVID. You can go to alohaorganic.org. And the cool thing about it is that at the bottom of all of our nutrients that we sell, we give you the recipe to make it yourself. In fact,
Yeah,
we
I
tell
was about to
people
ask for
that
recipes. Yeah.
our slogan really is that we're the second best fertilizer, because the first one is when you make it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that our real goal is a healthy, strong community. Like, when you think about what's in your bank account, I want to have a healthy, strong community in my bank account. Yeah, that to me is worth more than money. And it's something that we have to put as a critical component to our value system. Yeah, is our neighbor. Yeah, we are only as food secure as our neighbor is. That's the truth. Because the moment it hits the fan, the neighbor's going to look over the fence, see that I got food. He's going to try to take my food. So how
Yeah.
we insulate that, yeah, is by building community. Yeah, and it's really, like I said, it's not about even growing food for your neighbor. It's how can you get out of the food system by
Mm-hmm.
building your own. And that's something that I know that we can all participate in. I get people that live in buildings and say, "Oh, Daniel, I can't participate in this. I don't have any land." And I say, "Well, do you have food waste?" They go, "Yeah." I said, "Well, why aren't you doing small composting using lactic acid
Started doing
bacteria?"
that recently. Mm-hmm.
Right? Building soil. Because, you ask a farmer, and it's like, if somebody brings a 5-gallon bucket of high quality compost / delicious soil to your farm, you're going to treat that person so differently than someone that just came to buy food from you. Yeah, and we think of
Mm-hmm.
the million people that live on Oahu, and how many people, sure, so we can go inside, and how many people, I give you guys just a little shot of this is some of our food system
Yeah.
that
There's a got a taro as far as I can see there.
yeah, we got some noni, we got lemongrass here, tea leaf, a nice California grass there.
Nice.
um
All right. Well, we've been touching on it for sure. Well, first I'll say that again, as libertarians, we're big supporters of local
we-
sovereignty, and there's certainly some issues that need to be discussed in regards to Hawaii, because as you said, for around 100 years, you did have the Kingdom of Hawaii, and operated as a sovereign nation. And one fact that I read about recently was that they even had representatives of the royal family attending Queen Victoria's Golden Jubilee in for 50th anniversary of her reign in 1887 in Great Britain. So she would have been there, the future Queen Liliuokalani, alongside all the other European monarchs. So they were treated, at least in that sense, very similarly. Um, but
can I tell you a little story? Can I
yeah, go
add
ahead.
on to that? So the queen had the most difficult time. She invited sovereigns from all over the world. Here's my question. How do you seat the world's sovereigns? Who sits next to Queen Victoria? She did it by who could trace their genealogy back the furthest. So next to the queen, what was the first country that sat next to the queen? Japan, followed by Hawaii.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Okay.
So, I always get this comment. People are like, oh, well, if America didn't overthrow you, you'd be speaking Japanese. These good people don't realize that Hawaii was the first country to recognize Japan's independence, right? And it's sad to say that Japan has honor. Yeah, they come from a people of traditions. And I don't want to say that America is so young that it doesn't come from traditions, but it's easier to be less honorable when you don't come from a rich history of relationships. And these Asian countries, although Japan attacked Hawaii during the war, they actually didn't attack Hawaii. They attacked the United States' presence in Hawaii.
Yeah, they attacked the fleet at Pearl Harbor.
That's what it was. There was no Hawaiians in taro patches getting bombed on. Yeah. It was specifically a military to military offensive. And, we can all look back in history and make comments of what coulda, shoulda, and woulda. But Hawaii's ability to have international relationships and their ability to impact and affect other countries through diplomacy was absolutely amazing, right? The United States first tried to annex Hawaii under legislation, and that legislation was actually stopped because 98% of the Hawaiian community signed a petition. Almost 40,000 Native Hawaiians signed this petition, and it was taken to Washington, D.C. And this is actually what stopped the first attempt at annexation. Grover Cleveland actually signed an executive order returning Hawaii back to the Queen, of which Stanford B. Dole said, oh, we're no longer U.S. citizens. You can't tell us what to do, right? And he waited for McKinley to become president. McKinley, people don't realize this, he was really America's first corporate president. He had 200,000 from Vanderbilt, Carnegie, Rockefeller, and what was Standard Oil? Who was that?
That Standard Oil was Rockefeller.
Okay, Standard Oil's Rockefeller. There was one more.
Carnegie is the steel.
Steel. It was four
Vanderbilt,
American. Vanderbilt, and there was one more guy.
Morgan.
It was J.P. Morgan. Exactly. Those guys each gave McKinley 200,000 each. Yeah, he basically destroyed nobody had dealt with that kind of money before. And if people understand how Hawaii was annexed, it was through a joint resolution, the Newfoundland Resolution. So please tell me how legal are resolutions? Like, what do resolutions really do?
That's the kind of thing that Congress would pass to say, like, we stand with Ukraine. Like, it might mean something in theory, but in practice, it's just a statement of.
It's just a statement that the political parties have said that they stand behind, right? So first, it was annexed under a resolution. At the time, there were senators that said, this doesn't work. This isn't legal, right? The second part is super important. Congress, their legislation is only as effective as the borders of the United States. So that goes to 300 miles off the United States shores. Congress can't make even legislation that impacts another country. They can't say, oh, we're now China is a part of the United States through legislation. That doesn't work. So, how Hawaii Hawaii is under and still continues to be under military occupation. Plain and simple. And we can slice it, dice it as many ways as we want. The Congress, the president, both houses and the president in 1993 in another resolution basically accepted responsibility for being the military force in the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom.
Right. Yeah. So basically, the British and American planters who didn't like that the Queen was trying to take back the native sovereignty of Hawaii, they went to the American ambassador and they basically conspired to launch a coup and overthrow the Queen and have the country be annexed. That was how this all started, right?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
What is the consequence for treason in America?
Well, that's a good question. I
Believe it or not, it's death.
Yeah, I now that you say it, I remember it, but I was thinking that
treason is one of those super duper bad things. Yeah, and these men were treasonous. They were guilty of treason. And when Grover Cleveland said to the Queen, "What are you going to do when your country is returned to you?" She said, "We are simply going to follow the law." Yeah, these guys are all going to be tried for treason.
Yeah.
And here's the reality. In 1893, it was suicide for a white president to support a brown queen to enforce death sentences to white men. This is where we have to kind of go back and recognize that timing is everything. And at the time, it was literal political suicide for Grover Cleveland to put military force against white men for a brown queen.
Yeah, and one other thing I recall about Liliuokalani is that during the coup attempt, her soldiers actually outnumbered the American soldiers by something on the order of 2-1 or 3-1, and their weaponry was at least somewhat inferior. But regardless, if they did duke it out, which they didn't, but if they had, they probably would have prevailed. It's just that she did not want to shed Hawaiian blood, so she stood down.
Here's the craziest thing, and all your military nuts can go and check this out. But literally right now, the most confirmed hand-to-hand kills by any military is by Native Hawaiian. Yeah, if you were to take the 442nd, you were to take the Hawaiians and the Japanese from Hawaii, that 442nd is the most decorated military division ever. Yeah, the military might of Native Hawaiians is recognized and is currently being used by the United States military for the advantage of the US. Yeah, not only were they outnumbered, but they were badass fighters. Yeah, they were like the Israeli of the days. Yeah, I mean, Kamehameha the Great is still considered to be one of the greatest naval strategists in the history of naval warfare because he's the first guy to ever strap a cannon forward.
All right. So for those who might not be familiar, he was the first king of the Kingdom of Hawaii that unified all the islands together. Yeah. So that part I did not know, though. No, that's fascinating.
Native Hawaiians have played an instrumental role in the U.S. military history. And, unfortunately, joining the military is seemingly a pathway for Native Hawaiians to stay in their own homeland. Mm-hmm. Yeah, when you retire from the military, Hawaii gives you the highest, COLA. You get the most amount of benefits if you retire here. Unfortunately, it works against Native Hawaiians because we have a huge influx of non-Hawaiian military retirees, which impacts and affects our social political worlds every day.
Mhm. Well, we have a couple minutes left, so let me ask you, what's the future look like for yourself, your community center, and perhaps Hawaii as a whole? Given all these topics we've discussed in the episode.
I think Hawaii is going to continue to be a pioneer in sustainability, and I feel like our ability to be sustainable is going to inspire others across the United States. And the truth is that our future depends on regular, everyday Americans knowing and living the practice of liberty and justice for all.
Mhm.
Yeah, this is something that's so important. Yeah, if we are going to regain our international status, um, I pray that it's not through violence, but it's through education and diplomacy, and that what the average American citizen really wants is a future world of mutual respect and admiration and friendship towards each other.
Mhm.
Right now, it seems like that's almost impossible. But I think all those things that we claim are impossible are the things that we are the most afraid to do because we have the least understanding of how it impacts us. But the reality is that an internationally stable world, stable community, um, will create a different type of economy that is win-win for us all. And that's really what we need to find. Yeah, and the idea of Hawaii being the first non-European nation to get its independence recognized, um, and then to have it literally stolen um, in less than 50 years, I believe is a real message for every other country after Hawaii that has been recognized. Like, look, if we are not secure in our international relations, right, what does the Constitution say? The highest form of law are our treaties.
Mhm.
If we cannot respect the highest form of law, then there is no form that will be respected. And ultimately, that will be to the demise of the regular average American. Yeah. If the country disregards how they treat other countries, we're already seeing how they treat us. Yeah. How the average
Yeah.
American feels. And I believe that, and I know this to be true, that unorganized, uneducated Americans is the greatest threat to Americans.
Mhm.
And that we have to become educated and we have to organize and we literally have to fight for our rights that were God given.
Mhm. All right. Well, thank you
And
so much, Daniel. I think that everybody who's tuned into this and myself, we've learned so much that is not in our history textbook, but really needs to be said. And thank you again for telling us on all this and sharing your experiences. So, is there anything else you want to direct people to before we go?
yes, anyone that wants to support our sustainability movement can go and make a generous donation at ainamomona.org, AINAMOMONA.org. We're a small organization. We want to build our capacity to impact and affect more people. The reality is because of our work, we get zero government and institutional support. We saved our farm with the support of the community. How we're going to grow and move forward and reach more is actually going to be through community support. Every little amount counts. I can tell you, we raised $750,000 to save our farm on $25 and $100 donations. So don't think that you got to be rich to be a part of it. Know that the richness is when we all give and share, and know that I come from a long line of people that have given to the community, and I know that I am training the next community leaders in my children. So it's not like you're just helping us make it to tomorrow. You're actually helping to build the pathway to a better tomorrow by helping small groups like us. Thank you
All
so
right.
much.
Well, thank you again. Land is not cheap down there, so definitely anything that you all can help out with would be appreciated. I put the link in the show notes and the YouTube episode description wherever you're watching this at. So thanks again, Daniel.
A blessing to spend time with you today. Thank you again for your time. Aloha ahuiho.
Aloha. All right, so I'm just going to give a shout out again to the Liberty 101 class. More information and signing up for that is in the episode descriptions on August 17th in Philadelphia. We have made it to Maj's website as well for the Solutionary Center. I will post the link on that hopefully next week once I get confirmation that the information on it is correct. So that's it for this week. Until next week, don't forget to take human action. Bye.